Hi, and welcome back to the program. In this video, we're continuing with the previous code, and we're looking at methods. In the last video, we saw the print method, and we understood that print was something that you can do. So methods are always, or should always be, actions. In this case, the print method just prints something out to the console so that the user can see it. In addition, we can also, of course, create our own methods. If our programs could only use the print method, that would be a pretty boring program. In Python as well, we can always type the hash symbol, and what that does is that deactivates a certain line, and that in programming is called a comment. So here I'm just going to separate two sections of code by two hash symbols to make it easy for us to understand that this is a different sort of section. When I share this file with you, that'll also make it easier on you. So we've got the print method, and the print method we saw accepts a value. In this case, we gave it the value 56, and here we gave it the value hello. However, we can also create our own methods. So let's do just that. Let's create a method that replicates what the print method does. The first thing we have to do is to tell Python we're going to be defining a new method. And we do that with a def keyword, and notice how Atom already knows that def is a Python keyword because it puts it in purple. After the def keyword, we use a space, and then we type in our method name. I'm going to call it my print method, but you can call it whatever you want. The same restrictions as with variable names apply here. So you can make it as long or as short as you want, but it cannot start with a number, and it cannot contain any special characters. After my print method, we must also include a pair of brackets. And the brackets here are so we can include parameters. Let's talk about that in just a moment. Then we are going to put a colon, and then we're going to press enter. And notice how Atom already starts the next line slightly more spaced in. This is called indentation, and it's really important in Python. Whenever you see a colon, the next line must be indented. And all the indented lines, which we can have many, will belong inside this method. So for example, my print method may be something like print hello, and then we can also print world. Notice how the two lines are indented. Afterwards, we can keep essentially the indented lines, and all the lines will run when we run the method, or we can stop indenting just by deleting that space, and any lines we write after this will not belong inside the method. This is going to start making sense as we look at Python more. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to comment these out to disable them, essentially, and then we're going to go back to the terminal, and we're going to run our file again. So what do you think is going to come out when we run this file? Okay, hopefully you gave it some thought. You can always pause the video if you need to give it a bit more thought, and that's really important in this course, and I will do this asking you questions over and over just to make you think a bit. So what's going to happen is absolutely nothing. Nothing gets printed out. So why not? We've clearly said print hello, and we've clearly said print world, and yet nothing is coming out. Well, here's why. We've created a method that prints hello and prints world, but the act of creating the method does not run the method. So we also have to run the method after. And we do that by doing my print method and then open and close bracket. The opening and closing bracket at the end tells us that we are running the method. So let's save this and run it again, and now I'm sure you expect the right thing to come out, and that is hello world. So what's the brackets for? Why do we need them? Well, the brackets are there for a specific reason, which is for parameters, to give the method some values. For example, we can call it my parameter, And then instead of printing hello world, we're going to print my parameter. So what do you think is going to happen when we run this again? Give it some thought, and maybe even try it out yourselves in your code editors. Because what will happen is nothing extraordinary, but maybe something unexpected. We get a lot more than we signed up for. We've got a traceback, and then we've got a type error. The traceback in any programming language is just a list of what went wrong, really. And it tells you where things went wrong. So here it's telling us that in our file variables_methods.py in line 17, my print method went wrong. And then it also tells us the type of error. In this case, that's a type error. Quite redundant. And it says my print method takes exactly one argument, but 0 were given. Okay, so let's analyze exactly what this means. We can see that we've ran my print method in the same way that we ran the print method earlier. The print method here had one argument, my variable, and my print method has 0 arguments. We've given it 0 arguments. Here is one of the arguments, which for your convenience I will rename to my argument. That seems to make more sense. Parameters and arguments are the same thing, and me coming from a Java background tend to call them parameters, but in Python they're usually called arguments. My argument is exactly 1. So we have one argument there, we've given it 0, therefore Python says, hey, you've got a problem here. My print method expects you to give it one value, and you have not given it any values, so therefore we break. So let's give it a value. For example, this string hello world, and as you can remember, this hello world then goes into my argument, so my argument in this line becomes hello world, and then we're going to print that out. So let's save the file and go back and run it again, and what do you think is going to be printed out now? And as you may imagine, the words hello world come out. So all we've done here is we've said my argument is going to equal hello world, and then we're going to print that out. Let's have another example of a method. For example, my multiply method. And this method is not going to have one argument, but 2. So number 1 and number 2. And as you can see here, multiple arguments are separated by commas, and that tells Python that these are 2 separate arguments that we want. What goes at the end of any method definition? You know it. It's the colon, and afterwards every line has to be indented further than the def. So the def was at the very beginning of the line, the next line has to be indented further. Normally in Python the indentation is 4 spaces, but it can be anything, but it has to be at least 1 space. So here I've got 4 spaces of indentation. You can have fewer or more if you prefer. My multiply method then is going to do something called returning a value. So what we're going to do is we're going to return number 1 multiplied by number 2. Once again, we can do result, which is a new variable, is my multiply method 5 and 3. So what do you think is going to happen in this instance? What do you think will be the result, this variable here? What will be the value that we store in it? Give it a wild guess, but I'm sure you expect 15 to be in this variable at the end. So first let's verify that you are correct. So I'm going to print result. And I'm going to comment this out so it doesn't get printed out. Go back to the terminal, run this again, and of course you were correct and got the 15 out. So here's what happened. We created my multiply method, which takes in 2 parameters. One called number 1 and one called number 2. And then the method itself didn't print anything. All it did was return a value. So here's what happened. In order. First, the 5 became number 1, or number 1 became 5, number 2 became 3, so these values went in that direction. Number 1 times number 2 got calculated and gave us 15. And then when we return, what happened is that this entire thing became 15. And then the 15 got assigned to result. So that's what returning is. It just essentially replaces the method call by the return value. And then you can do things with it. And in this case, what we did was put it inside the result variable. Of course, if we comment the print out and we run the program, you can surely expect something, or maybe nothing, will happen. And you probably got it right. Nothing happens, because once again, we've not printed anything out. All we've done is created a variable, and creating a variable does not print things out. We can also take it a step further and use myPrint method to print the result. Now, here's what's going to happen. First, we're going to calculate the 15 and put it inside result. And then result is going to go into my argument, and that's going to get printed out. Let's save the file and run this again. And the 15 comes out. Something to notice here is that we've got the myMultiply method, and we're putting the value into a variable, but we don't have to do that. We can do myPrint method, myMultiply method, 5 and 3. And I'm going to comment this out. And the same thing will happen, the same order. First, the 5 will go into number 1 and the 3 will go into number 2. We will calculate the result of my multiply method, which is 15. And then we're going to use that result as my argument. And then we're going to print that out. So exactly the same thing is going to happen. And we can nest these methods, put them inside one another as much as we'd like. But naturally, if we do that many times, the code becomes really long and complicated and difficult to read. So I would not suggest you do that. This pattern here, putting things in variables and then using those variables, is more readable. And therefore, it's usually easier to understand. So really, that's everything for this video. So I hope you learned something. And let's quickly move on to the next one. We're going to be looking at some more types of data that we can use in Python, other than numbers and strings. I'll see you in the next video.